Right now, as you read this sentence, there is a voice in your head saying the words. You may not have noticed it until this exact moment. That's normal. The voice runs constantly, in the background, narrating, judging, planning, replaying, and most people never stop to ask where it comes from, why it's there, or whether everyone else has the same thing happening inside their skull. Here is the part that surprises almost everyone the first time they hear it. Not everyone does. In 2011, psychologist Russell Hurlburt at the University of Nevada developed a method called Descriptive Experience Sampling. Participants carried a small device that beeped at random intervals throughout the day. The moment it beeped, they recorded exactly what was happening in their consciousness at that instant, not what they thought was typical, not a general impression, but the precise content of their experience in that specific moment. What Hurlburt found, after decades of this research across thousands of samples, broke apart a basic assumption almost everyone carries without examining it. Inner speech, the experience of silently talking to yourself in words, was present in only about a quarter of the sampled moments, on average, and the variation between individuals was enormous. Some people lived almost entirely inside a verbal narration of their own existence. Others reported virtually none. Their thinking happened in images, in unworded feelings, in pure abstract concepts that never touched language at all. In 2020, this idea broke into public consciousness almost by accident. A Twitter thread asking whether everyone has an inner monologue went viral, and the replies revealed something extraordinary. Large numbers of people discovering in real time, often for the first time in their adult lives, that what they assumed was a universal feature of being human was not universal at all. People with constant inner narration were stunned that anyone could think without words. People without it were equally stunned that anyone's mind ran a continuous verbal commentary all day, every day. Researchers later gave this absence a name. Anendophasia, literally, without inner speech. People with anendophasia are not less intelligent, less self-aware, or less capable of complex thought. Many report that they think in something closer to pure intention or visual simulation. They know what they're going to do or say without rehearsing it in words first. Some only discover their condition is unusual decades into life, when a conversation reveals that the phrase, "the voice in my head," was never a metaphor for everyone else. It was literal. So if inner speech isn't universal, what is it actually doing for the people who have it? The leading theory comes from the Russian psychologist Lev Vygotsky, working in the 1920s and 30s. Vygotsky proposed that inner speech develops directly out of the speech children use out loud. Watch any toddler playing alone, and you'll hear them narrating their own actions, putting the block here, now this one goes there. Vygotsky called this private speech. As children develop, this external narration doesn't disappear. It internalizes. It compresses, speeds up, and moves inside the skull, becoming the silent inner voice that adults experience as simply thinking. This explains something strange about inner speech that almost nobody notices until it's pointed out. It sounds like you, in your own voice, in your own native language, often even with your own accent and speech patterns. That's not a coincidence. It's literally compressed external speech, miniaturized and internalized, retaining the fingerprints of how you learned to talk in the first place. Neuroscience confirms this connection at the level of the brain itself. Studies using fMRI have found that inner speech activates many of the same regions as actually speaking out loud, Broca's area, involved in language production, lights up whether you're talking to someone else or silently narrating your own thoughts. The brain doesn't fully distinguish between the two. This is why imagining yourself giving a speech can make your heart rate rise the same way actually giving it would. The simulation and the reality share neural circuitry. But inner speech isn't just compressed talking. Research by psychologist Charles Fernyhough at Durham University has shown that inner speech can take different forms depending on the task. Sometimes it's condensed and fragmentary, a kind of telegraphic shorthand that wouldn't make grammatical sense if spoken aloud, but that you understand perfectly because you already know what you mean. Other times, particularly when rehearsing something important, it expands into full, grammatically complete sentences, as if you were practicing the actual conversation. This is one of the genuine functions of inner speech that researchers have confirmed experimentally. It helps regulate behavior. Studies have shown that people perform better on certain self-control and planning tasks when they're allowed to use inner speech, and measurably worse when that inner speech is artificially blocked. For instance, by having them repeat an unrelated word out loud while performing the task, which occupies the same verbal channel inner speech relies on. The voice in your head isn't just commentary. In many cases, it's doing actual cognitive work, helping you hold a plan in mind, talk yourself through a difficult decision, or rehearse what you're about to say before you say it. There's also a darker side that explains why inner speech has become such a focus in clinical psychology. The same mechanism that lets you silently coach yourself through a hard conversation is the mechanism that delivers harsh, repetitive self-criticism at 2 a.m. Research on rumination, the tendency to replay negative thoughts on a loop, has found that this process is almost entirely carried out through inner speech. The voice that helps you plan your day is the same voice that, in people prone to anxiety and depression, can turn relentlessly critical, replaying the same failure or embarrassment in identical words, over and over, with no new information being added each time. This is part of why certain therapeutic techniques work as well as they do. Cognitive behavioral therapy, at its core, is partly a method for noticing and restructuring inner speech, catching the automatic internal sentence and replacing it with a different one. It treats the inner voice not as an unchangeable feature of personality, but as something closer to a habit, built the same way Vygotsky described it being built in childhood, and therefore capable of being rebuilt. There's a final detail in Hurlburt's research that rarely makes it into popular summaries of this topic. Even among people who do experience constant inner speech, the moments they report sampling were far less verbal overall than they expected going in. Most participants, before the study, assumed their mind was talking to itself almost continuously. After weeks of genuine random sampling, the actual data showed something closer to a quarter of moments containing identifiable inner speech. The rest of consciousness, the majority of it, was something else entirely: sensory awareness, unworded emotion, images, feelings with no language attached to them at all. In other words, even the people with the loudest inner voice are spending most of their conscious life in a state that has no words in it whatsoever. The narration feels constant because it's salient, because language is what we notice, what we can report on, what feels like thinking. But it may be more like a soundtrack laid over a film that was already running before the music started. The voice reading these words to you right now, the one that's been narrating this entire video inside your skull, it is not a universal feature of human consciousness. It is one particular strategy among several that minds use to organize themselves. Some people have never had it. Some people have it so constantly they assumed everyone did. And almost everyone who has it has no idea until someone points it out, that it's only there about a quarter of the time they think it is.